Okay, looks like it's recording. Okay, hi, this is Kevin Sutter, and I'm covering for John for the first half of the call. He had a meeting that was overrunning, and I had one that just ran up to the hour, so I'm just now getting going. I did put a link into the chat for our agenda and meeting minutes. It's everyone's responsibility to update the your attendance by yourself and to help collect minutes as we go along. So Amelia, did you say you wanted to wait for taking your picture?
I am taking screenshots, so I can work on with this without smiley faces today.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so today's call is just focused on the working group discussion. We aren't doing the normal hangout type activities. So we're making a lot of progress with that charter. There's still discussions going on in there. One of the items that I'm going to put the link here because I think that might help with the discussion here.
If you're talking about the document, Kevin, can you just share the document? Because if you're talking about, you're talking about voting rules. Okay, I was going to say that.
Because I wasn't going to go into the document itself because one of the items that has come up is it's kind of voting rules and it's kind of the composition of the working group. And I know that the posts that I did here, the link, this is something that David posted, when was it? Last week, I guess. It was after our last hangout call, I think. And it was just kind of describing another way of looking at the composition of the working group and how voting might occur. And so I see that David is on, and I'm wondering if maybe, David, you want to start to kind of walk us through this and see if this is something that people would want to entertain.
Sure. So one of the critical needs that we need to accomplish in terms of the specification process is the reason this thing all got kicked off is the legal protection of the specification process. And a key thing about that is getting somebody who can speak on behalf of the company and say, we company agree to this specification in a very, very easily understandable way that it's officially coming from the company and it specifically applies to that specification, such that if that information is put in front of a judge and jury, people who are not technical can understand that the company officially said, we agreed to these things, and therefore, if they sue for patent infringement the week later, it would be disingenuous, clearly. Now, the way we organize ourselves in an open source community where there's a bunch of people from all the different companies and they're speaking in conflicting terms, that doesn't help the ability for us to get protected in a patent situation. Now, the key thing, however, is that we have been a community-led, group for all these years. And we haven't been, heavily vendor focused. As such, we've got Kevin and Emily and Alistair and all the people from IBM, they all get a vote. We have Ken, John, Mark, Scott, lots of people from Red Hat that get a vote. Ourselves, just basically, if you're contributing, you get a vote. We've just sort of not paid attention to people's numbers, and you earn your commit, and you earn your vote, and everyone's happy. So the thought is, how do we keep doing what we're doing and being kind of more of a community-led place while adding this clear protection on top? And so one of the thoughts was maybe we just have, two tallying systems. One is there's the committer's vote, and the majority there leads to an ultimate pass. And then there's the supermajority vote of each vendor is officially on record, and that has to pass. And if the two pass, votes passed. So that's the concept. We basically just put this vendor vote on top of what we're already doing. And then we're not picking certain key people out of the committer group and saying you get the luxury of a vote, but everybody else no longer now gets a vote. So that's the idea.
Okay, so question for you on this.
Sure.
Is this like, would we change the composition of the working group as we currently have it defined then?
We can take it where we want to take it. I mean,
you know, I guess I'm just wondering, is this really just a voting concept, or is it a composition of the work group concept as well?
You know, I don't know that it applies to all situations. Definitely it applies to the specifications and what we produce. In terms of if we're going to change the budget, for example, you know, a community vote on how much the corporation pays is probably not productive. You know what I mean? So there's limits. You know, obviously if you put you could put it up to a vote that we'll all pay $1 million each, but you know, what good does that do? So, you know, I think there's flexibility there, but the primary thing is, at least what I'm trying to get at, is to make sure that it isn't just, you know, that the people who have input and have a vote now can continue to have a vote.
Yep.
And we're not selecting specific people.
Yeah, what for me is not clear, and it's not about the who gets the vote and majority and supermajority or whatever. But I think there are different types of voting which will take place. You have the vote for, is this release of the specification, is that approved, yes or no? But there are other kinds of votes. I know there is also the committee vote, but other kinds, basic daily to daily things about specifications, platform, related things, if we go it that way. And that's then not clear who gets to vote in what situation for me. Maybe also other people have that same issue.
Yeah, so I think, just to clarify that a little bit, and David, maybe you just want to, you know,
well, yeah, I think
we've just make sure.
Yeah, I think what we've been talking about is where possible, all votes are just straight up standard, regular Eclipse development process community votes.
Right. That's what I wanted to clarify. What your new proposal, David, is in specific response to the working group voting.
Right. Which the most majority of those votes are in the specification process itself.
Yeah, I shouldn't say working group voting, but yes, the steering and spec committee voting. So Rudy, like the stuff where the committers getting in, I mean, nothing there would change. Same voting mechanism, same voting concepts, everything is the same for that.
Yeah. And then my follow-up question is then, if then those votings, mainly spec and related things, it's just for the IP flow. So why do we need a whole lot of committers to have their say about, is this now approved or not? Is that IP cleared or not?
Well, it isn't just, I mean, the IP flow is what is protected by that vote. But it's not that people are voting as to whether or not to allow the IP to be accepted. It's the overall, it would be for the overall specification work, you know, the JSF, or I'm sorry, I'm getting confused with Jakarta, sorry. The metrics specification, it goes through a review and then it has to be voted on to make sure that, yes, the content of this is what we actually want to release. And so it's even more than just the IP that we'd be voting on. It'd be the content of the specification and the APIs and the TCKs and the certification requests, and is everything in place in order to support this release. So it's a technical content as well as protecting the IP.
But is that contenting not already discussed in the specification itself, in the metric specification? Is not every committer is role to make sure that everything is already as good as it should be in the spec, in the API, in the doc, in the TCK before you go to that review process?
Certainly. That's the idea, is that it's done beforehand.
Yeah.
But this just kind of gives the last resort, basically.
So at the moment, we don't have this extra like a layer, the vote. I think I can see what Rudy is coming from. Currently, like we have like do a milestone release, and then people happy, and just go ahead and ship it. So with this worker group, so according to the IP requirement, so that needs to have one vote. Basically, the one voting. So from a corporate, like a super majority from corporate members, and plus the committer. However, that committer is kind of 2-in-1, and also if the multiple committers from the same corporate member, and then that kind of vote merged into one, so that consolidated. So that's the kind of used to cover the IP. So I think is with the newly introduced this committer vote, that's kind of introduce another not required by Eclipse Foundation, and we add one extra like a layer in our own like a release process. I'm wondering, I mean, why we need to add this one, and in the past we don't have this. So it's not required by the IP either.
So,
Well, yeah, maybe just so quickly on that is our lazy consensus approach of getting releases out the door, that's going to go away regardless. So there is going to be an official vote added, and that is required by the specification process. And we have inquired about lazy consensus for specification work, and it has been said that that isn't possible. So the fundamental statement of why this overhead, the statement, it's unavoidable, the overhead. And so really the question is, how can we add this in a way that doesn't dramatically change how the MicroProfile community feels? Like we feel like a community-led community.
I can understand the overhead, and it is indeed required for those specifications, but what I find difficult to understand is why then all the committers need to have a say in this, because they had already their opportunity to make it right during the creation of the specification.
Yeah, I agree, Rudy. I think I think is kind of in this approach. I mean, I'm speaking from a committer myself. So if I like, for example, the spec, I trust them, and in the past they have done a good job, and it's the kind of suddenly what people will feel like they working hard on that spec, and the other people and last minute say no, I vote -1. So actually it's, I see what you are coming from, David. Make committers like feel they have some right to exercise. But for me, I'm speaking from a committer myself. In the past, I have not. I am not bothered with the vote for the spec to be released.
So
I don't think this add anything I'm happy for the corporate, for the vote required by Eclipse Foundation to cover the IP.
And we can have that 2-to-1 ratio as proposed now, but I don't see any added value of having all the committers also having their vote
Yeah, yeah.
here.
It would be instead of the 2-to-1. So we wouldn't
Right.
be running elections. We wouldn't be holding a fixed number of seats. We would just not do the overhead of annual elections. And we wouldn't have the overhead of making sure that the process of who gets to be the 3 people out of all of our 50 committers are the most honest and true and fair. And we would skip all of that garbage of if we pick these people, it's flawed in this way. If we pick these people, it's flawed in that way. And, you know, none of that happens. We just simply would say, you're a committer, you get a vote. That vote has to pass by majority in concurrent, you know, and we don't even have to have different separate vote threads. It'd just be like one thread, everybody votes, and the tallying happens. All the vendor people who are assigned by the vendors, that vote has to, you know, they have to reach a majority and of the supermajority, and then everybody else has to reach a majority. So that's it. There's nothing complicated about it.
But then we should have the votes. They should be public, but not during the voting period as we have now, because then you can have influence.
Sure, I think all that's fine. I mean, you know, basically it's just a simple way. Everyone gets to vote, and then we tally it up in a specific way that, you know, we can't proceed if we don't have, if we can't release a specification if the vendors don't by supermajority agree, because then it's going to be flawed from a patent perspective.
Mhm.
But then, and also in the same way, you know, the statement of, well, we've done our work and everyone should be happy, but what if you have input, right? And also, maybe you worked like your butt off for MicroProfile 4.0, and then you just sit there and watch your boss vote and twiddle your thumbs if you have any feedback, or, you know, that's also not that great. You know, right now, it's if you're doing a lot of work, you get a vote, and so keeping that in the community would be great. Basically, we just have one large vote, and then the way we tally it up would be there'd be 2 groups tallied, and both of those have to pass.
And
So
let me interject here. We're talking about supermajority, but we haven't decided. When I think about supermajority, I'm thinking corporate 2/3 votes pass, and committers 2/3 vote pass.
The problem with that is that a supermajority requires everybody who has the ability to vote to work. And we have a lot of committers who are not active, right?
Mhm.
So basically, we would require a 2/3 majority of all possible voters for the corporate vote. But for the committer vote, it would just be by majority. Whoever, if there are 50 committers, but only 12 vote,
Mhm.
then the majority of the 12 have to agree.
right.
Okay, so just to clarify that, it's the majority of the voting members.
Yes, that is, I was confused, Kevin. Thank you so much. It's not what I was thinking while we were talking supermajority, because I'm assuming the other way we vote.
Yeah, I
What
think,
like active committers, which is a totally different thing. And there is a thread at the moment. It started, I think, this week. I just got up on it about revising our committers. And I see it even before this call. I saw it as necessary to tackle that, because it totally goes into how we do things and how we will move forward with the IP protection and the working group standalone proposal.
well, yes,
So
it does get related to this, but the thing that I wanted to clarify, because David, in your original post that I have on the screen, it
Yeah, and
does
the
say
original vote, I said
supermajority of
supermajority.
committers.
Yeah. I realized that the flaw in that is that then if there are 50 committers, we couldn't get a vote through unless 2/3 of those people voted every time, and they all voted at least +1. So that's too much overhead. But if we just simply say, you know, majority of whoever from the committership votes.
Yes. Okay.
So this is this ratio, like a 2:1 ratio. That's kind of in the Eclipse Foundation proposal. And also is all,
like we created that concept.
okay. So in the Jakarta, like the process, they have a committer, like the committee member. So in this case, if we use this one, so it's every MicroProfile committer is a committee member, right?
Exactly.
Because they can vote.
Right.
However, in that committer, when it's elected and etc., is a third is kind of active, so committers. So in that case, like if we use this one, every committer MicroProfile eligible for the active for the vote, and then we have to work out is that active committer is also mandated by Eclipse Foundation, or
No.
is
I have nothing that addresses active or inactive. I mean, it's just, we don't do that now, right? Like everybody who's a committer has the ability to have some input, and that's just generally the way we operate.
so it's basically if I summarize what you are saying. So is the one difference with the Jakarta, like the members, committee members, does go through like every year go through election process.
Right.
And then in MicroProfile, this kind of all the MicroProfile committers is MicroProfile is still MicroProfile committee member.
Sure.
That's kind of lifelong, no election, and automatically opt in, and then
yeah, I mean, your election is when you get elected as a committer. That's the election.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, only once is a kind of opting in once.
So Emily, you mentioned something super nice that I thought it was a little bit lost in the current thread. And it's about, there was a confusion about nominating committers and then the nominating a committer or the project itself, nominating a committer to work on the working group and the steering in a specification committee. Those two things are absolutely different. First, you need to be a committer of the project, but to be voted, if you are not in one of the corporations or one assigned to it and voted in or elected, then not only you have to go 2 steps. One, if you're new, you need to become a MicroProfiler committer. Then you need to be voted and nominated. And only what I want to say is, who votes when? Does the community, the committers vote for anyone that is elected into the new steering committee?
There's no election.
No,
Yeah,
no election.
We wouldn't have an election with this proposal because we wouldn't need it.
This is great. I'm getting so many questions and I myself do not know how to answer. So yeah, this is great because
there's no fair way to pick 3 people out of 50 people.
Exactly. So
there's just no way to do it, right? Anything we do is just going to make somebody unhappy.
Correct. Okay, I love this because I have been asked about this and I don't have the answer. I'm like, I have no idea. Join the call. Okay, so then it's clear. Rudy, continue asking questions because you make us brainstorm together. This is great.
No, it was just because it was not clear for me what exactly, like when those 2 groups of people would have to vote, and it's for the spec and the steering committee. But maybe we should
clarify that as well.
Clarify that, and it probably is already done in one way or another, or it will be done clearly in that charter.
Right.
So let me throw someone in here, someone that is here, hopefully is able to talk. Emerson, you are supposed to be helping in release 4. And what are your takes on this conversation? I haven't heard you talk so much, and I would love to hear from you.
Okay. Yeah. The first time I try to get involved in the process, I get the situation I know I'm a committer. So I'm not sure what is the decision about that. So the first thing I have to get involved in the project, maybe I would like to learn the process, what is the release process you use, and everything. I can support and I can help by myself, no problem at all. But the condition of not being a committer is an impediment to participate. Is no way to me to focus on that. So I'm pretty open to collaborate in whatever you need, and I'm happy to be part of the group in whatever decision you're gonna take about the working group or the different composition you are deciding right now. I'm a personal contributor. I'm not tied to any organization. I'm not tied to any particular interest. I just getting involved for maybe the last year that I started helping to the Tommy group translations, and I has been paying attention to the meetings. Sometimes I'm just getting involved with the TCK process that is a little complicated to me, but I have been going through the grab QL project. I have been going through the tracing project. I'm very interested in the Helidon project that is the one is implementing the GPA and stuff like that. So what I mean, I'm pretty open to whatever you wanna from me to collaborate. And I know I don't wanna complicate myself with the bureaucracy process. I'm pretty agree that there are things you are interested on, like a company or like a personal contributor. But in my case, I'm no worry of those things. So I just want to be part of the group. I just want to be useful for whatever you can take from me, and that's it basically. Nothing else.
Okay.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yes.
Kevin, go ahead.
I was just going to say, thank you, Emerson, for volunteering like this and doing whatever is necessary. I will put in an apology. John and I were just talking about this, and because the MicroProfile 4.0 release is, kind of on hold until we get this other stuff done, we have not been able to utilize you yet, Emerson, for doing much with the 4.0 release. And I do know that John was going to reach out to you because to get really involved with the release, you do need to be a committer, and we learned that with Edwin with the previous release. And so that is something that we do need to work with you on, and I know John has plans to try to pull you into more of the activities.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, if I can
sorry.
go back to what David had proposed, I'm going to just kind of read into how Rudy replied. And Emily, I'm sure you were about to reply, but are there any reservations if we go forward with this proposal? If we work this back into the working group charter, do we have any concerns with going that route? Is there anybody that has concerns or questions?
I have one more question. So for this one, like I think before we taking any write down in our charter and etc., I think is possible. Can we run past the Eclipse Foundation to find out whether it's kind of acceptable?
Well, we've got Ivar and Tanya on, and so far they haven't said anything. So I don't know. I don't know if we're saying anything out of order. Any input from those two?
I haven't heard anything that is any problematic, but I'm not sure if I'm the right guy to talk either. But I think it sounds good.
Well, I know, our liaison with this whole process is Paul Buck, and I did not have a chance to touch base with him before this call today, but I was going to do that just to verify that it would be acceptable.
Yeah, he's
before we go through the whole process of reworking this, but we did want to discuss this with the community, so that's why we teed David up and talked through it.
The concept for simplifying it would be we would always just run community votes, and then because the specifications have specific patent concerns, there would be the separate vendor tallying on top.
Yep.
And then, so basically it would be like, we're always running the same vote process, but only for the specifications, and where needed, we add that, you know, vendor layer, separate vendor tallying on top. So we make sure we have a supermajority of vendors.
Can we, is there anywhere in the charter that we are writing that we can add this explanation on? We have a part that's
absolutely.
we need to write that out, and it needs to be short.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Like let's work on that, because I think it's pretty clear. Has anyone in this call has any other questions related to what we just discussed on voting? Because we're going to write it, and then you can add any comments you want to make it better. This is a resolution, right, Kevin? You're like controlling the. We no one wrote.
Yeah, that's right. That's the exact idea, Amelia. Is that if you know, I know this is a smaller subset. We only have about 14 people, I guess, today. 14, or a subset of our bigger team. But the idea was to get feedback on it. And we did get some good questions from Rudy and Emily. And so
And Emerson.
Oh, yes.
Just
and Emerson. But yeah, I think that is the way to go, is to take this discussion. I'll verify it with Paul Buck to make sure that we aren't breaking any Eclipse rules or anything. And if we are, we'll have to bring it back. But if not, then we would rework the charter for those couple of sections so that we could move that forward.
Sounds wonderful to me. Like anyone unhappy, and we're making sure we're videotaping this. Kevin, we have 34 minutes and everything is for the working group. Do we go now into the draft, or do we have anything else pending from the forum on this topic? I am behind the forum. I just catch up with one email today.
Yeah, so this was the one item for the voting rules. The other thing that we wanted to bring up is that there was a draft of the MicroProfile specification process posted yesterday. And it's a new thread on Google group, and it's got a link out there. We've gotten some good feedback from Wayne so far. And I'm just, going to kind of summarize, but if all of Wayne's input is accepted, it pretty much collapses all the way down to accepting the Eclipse Foundation specification process. So it's getting very simplified, which is very good, because that's what we want. We want a simplified specification process that just builds upon the Eclipse specification process. So
okay, for people like me that have yet to check the week on the forum, can you show the document, how many pages, and just browse it? This is the place where we gouge for, hey, this is what we have there, and then just tell us. I imagine you were one of the ones doing the crude draft with John and maybe Scott and David, or I do not know who was involved in this kind of thing, but.
Yep, it same, cast of characters, I guess. That we tried to put something together because it's always easier to look at a straw man than it is to just start with a blank sheet of paper. So
you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put your names in there. Draft 0.01, like submitted this day. Bye. Go ahead.
Really not much to it. I mean, there was complicated garbage in there, and we got to get this done with. So,
yep.
It's like,
yep. So, like I said, please go out and take a look. And I know we still have to do some more discussing, but I went through Wayne's comments this morning, and it's kind of like, if all of his comments are valid, we're pretty much getting down to, yep, we accept the Eclipse Foundation specification process. So we do need to get that, but that would be great if that's what we simplified down to. I have no problem with that.
Kevin, the document seems to be 2 pages, correct?
Currently, yes, that's it. 1.5 pages.
Oh, that's amazing.
We need to add like at least 10 more pages to it somehow.
Well, okay, so let's be honest here. Here's the Eclipse Foundation specification process, and so everybody out here, you're welcome to go out and read all this, but this is what we've been doing, is going through this, looking at all the terms, all the definitions, trying to figure out how can it apply to the MicroProfile project, and do we have to deviate from it at all? Do we have to create a derivative of the specification process to satisfy our process? So yeah, there's a lot of information out here. I don't know how many pages this is. It's just one long page, but that's a lot of stuff to go through. So I don't want to come across like our specification process total is just one page and that's it. I mean, there's a lot to it because you have to understand what's already being provided for us.
Right.
As a comparison, you can have a look at the Jakarta specification process, which is only one page.
Yeah. Well, we helped draft all of these. So we
Yes,
have
exactly. So it's the same thing. And actually this MicroProfile process, since you're using the default values for the review periods, you can remove that section.
Yep.
It's even shorter.
Well, you know that what is cool that the same people that wrote that specification is in this group. So we're very lucky. I have to say, and we have not said it enough, thank you to Scott, to Kevin, to David, to John for curating lots of this documentation. We don't, like most of us don't even have an idea of the calls that will go into, let's make it super compact and things like this. And I really appreciate it because otherwise we will be until next year because this is legal and this is a lot of things that can go wrong. If a reader that is 7 years old can understand the page, it's a win in my book. So thank you for.
You are welcome.
I think the most important thing is that this is just an attempt to get something for us to discuss so we can discuss. So I always get a little nervous when there isn't much discussion. I don't know if that means we did a good job or people have thoughts that they're not sharing.
Well, yeah, and part of it, you know, our draft was just posted last night.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. So, you know.
But just to follow up on Ivar's comment, so this is the Jakarta EE specification process. Couple of main things, they needed to adjust the progress review, release review, and service release review, and they increased it from 7 days to 14 days. So that was one key difference. And then the other thing is to explain that the JavaX namespace is basically frozen, and if this community wants to move forward, they have to move to another namespace. So those were the big items that want to be clarified in the Jakarta EE specification process. So even theirs is only a page long.
I see also the reference to the TCK in that one page that we have, the ratification. Probably we need then to rediscuss the thread that we had, the architecture thread about what is now a compatible implementation. Do we only have the MicroProfile specifications? What about the Jakarta ones, if we switch to them and whatever? So I'm not sure where that should go then. Yeah.
So that's a good question, Rudy. And this is one thing that, you know, all of us have stumbled over as we continue to go through that. From a specification process, yes, a TCK is required. But what exactly does that TCK consist of, and how are you going to test it, and what's the certification process? That's a different process that needs to be defined. So that does not directly come into play for the specification process, because it just says, yes, you need a TCK and associated license and associated process. But how those get delivered and defined, that's a separate work item.
And is that outside the working group discussions, or is that part of?
That eventually would be part of the working group discussions as well.
Are you sure though? Because, you know, we can get formed and then work on the operations and process.
Exactly. Sorry, that's what I meant.
It's not related. We can finish the working group garbage and then tackle that, right?
Yes, okay. But I guess my point was that it's still a working group with the community input discussion in order to define those things.
Sure.
Yes, but they do not have to be in place before we finalize this working group.
Exactly. We need a specification process, and we need a charter, and those are the two things that we need. And we can form the garbage, get on track for 4.0, and work on what does it mean for someone to pass a TCK? What does it mean for someone to disclose properly they've passed the TCK? And all that garbage would be in the process document that we could define ourselves as a community after the working group work is done.
Yep.
So even in the specification process in the Eclipse Foundation one, I read it today. So it's a kind of about TCK compliance. It didn't say anything details. Didn't say, I know in Jakarta you upload the proof. So that means that details does not need to be in the specification process, right? So it's
Correct.
Right. Okay.
And we had a lot of discussion in the specification committee on the Jakarta side, like what needs to be in the process versus in the TCK, what needs to be in the specification process versus just written up and understood as a guideline, or, because revising the specification process requires like, a lot of votes. And I don't recall if that even requires some sort of, board acknowledgement or executive director acknowledgement, but basically it's more of a heavy-handed endeavor.
Yeah, it's not just submitting a PR.
Right. Yeah. Whereas updating our own process documents, that's something we can do at will. And so basically what we tried to do is put the majority of the it needs to be on, if you read through this document, here, let me put it in the chat. If you read through that, it's very specific. Like, you need to come up with results that have this field, that field, that field, that field, and that field in it, and so on and so forth, and that's something we can revise ourselves whenever we find something that works or doesn't work or want to adapt or change. And we don't have to keep updating the specification process.
Right.
So we opted to keep the specification process fairly light and put the really specific details, which we think we're probably going to mutate over time, in the process document. So we would do the same thing. We would just make a specification process that's a very thin derivative of the Eclipse specification process, and leave the bulk of how we want to operate in terms of what is good enough for this, and what is good enough for passing, and what is good enough for disclosing the results, and what data has to be in there. All that stuff is stuff we can just decide together and then write down.
And just to clarify that a little bit too, we don't have to be perfect with that process when we first define it. I mean, if you think about Jakarta EE8, we barely had anything written down, and we were trying to figure out the process as we went, and then we were updating the documented process as we were going. So there can be some of that as well.
We're allowed to learn lessons.
Yes.
Teresa is static in the noise.
I think John was trying to talk, but we're getting static from you.
Now he says 1 minute.
Okay.
Do sign language, John.
Mm-hmm.
That was like the Zoom version of Charlie Brown adult voice.
So I know John is kind of on tap for the next item on the agenda.
So the other thing is about worker group thing, the worker group. So I think is the specification is the process, the modification is pretty lightweight. So I think not many questions. I think is a worker group, like chapters need to have more work.
Yeah, we know that we still have some work out there. I mean, most of the items are getting resolved. We do, I mean, you know, we know that we have to figure out the fee structure. We're not going to get into that on this call because that would take up the rest of the time. But that is something that we do need to work on and figure out. And we're getting input from, you know, multiple organizations and the Eclipse Foundation to try to figure that out. So we do know that that is one item that needs to be resolved, and it's a big item. And we need to do it. The other items, really, I think they're really kind of coming together. I mean, yeah, there's still some questions, but you know, I think we can get most of the other stuff resolved.
You know what I noticed while working on that proposal, because now we have moved it into the Word doc, I noticed that there are some things that we discovered the project needs. And I think what John has created with the tracking in GitHub is an extension to that for later. Or, you know, it goes like, is it now or is it later? Because while we are understanding what might be needed as a working group, we realize things that we didn't have before that are necessary. Not because we need to be more disciplined, but it's just because it's nice and it lowers our debt. What I'm seeing is that it's likely that the growing pains are going to be minimized because we are already tackling those issues we have back when the conversation started 2 years ago to now. That is my perspective, but I'm not sure if others can see it. John, you're trying to talk.
No, still not going.
So do we have like a plan when we get? I think it's good to get like Eclipse Foundation, like review the process as we go along. So
they are.
In case.
They are. I mean, they've been active with commenting on our charter. And like I said, Wayne was very active with reviewing our specification process. So
yeah,
yes.
I noticed Wayne. So, but you said pull back is our, I mean.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I mean, it's as a whole team, right? So, you know, so first of all, when we talk about, you know, we worked all together to make the Eclipse specification process. You know, Jakarta EE was the first guinea pig, and that's where a lot of the conversations happened. And, you know, so there's a lot of people all working together and a lot of Eclipse people working together with all of us, you know, so we're going to continue to hear from like lots and lots of people, and that's good.
And a reminder in this call for everyone that just joined and doesn't know, Wayne is our technical, what is it called? Like,
well,
like
Wayne's sort of like a, you know, like I don't know what official title he has, but he's kind of like CEO.
Is under incubation, and Wayne has been assigned to the project to work with us way back when we were sending the proposal to bring MicroProfile to Eclipse. So this is super important, and I don't think we say it enough, but he has been there from when we were interested in becoming a part of the foundation. And he continues to be a valuable resource because he knows we will not waste his time. He gets pulled when it's necessary. So
yeah, he's our mentor. He's MicroProfile mentor.
So Wayne, we love you. We appreciate you.
Yeah, well, it's vice versa, right? It's all of the above. You know, like when we were forming the original specification process, you know, he was relying on a lot of our experience working in the JACP and that kind of stuff, and we relied on a lot of his experience on how Eclipse works, and we came up with a marriage of that process. And so, you know, everyone's relying on everybody, and everyone continues to have input. And yes, Wayne is awesome.
Emily, so does that answer your question? You asked, are we working with the Eclipse Foundation so that we are not wasting our time duplicating things or doing things that will not work?
Yeah, so it's basically especially for the committer conversation, etc. So it's so we don't want to go too far without
sure.
I mean, notifying the
Right, and that's why we're doing all this stuff publicly. And I'll just state again, you know, when we were making all these processes for Jakarta, there was a very honest sentiment of let's make something that actually fits. And whatever that is, let's figure out what it is and then figure out if there's a way to make it okay. And, you know, so that's the spirit here as well. You know, let's make something that actually fits. And, you know, let's see if we can make it okay, right? If the, you know, get it as close as we can, then dial it in from there.
And the coolest thing is that it's being done via open, full transparency. Anyone can join and speak up and add value. So this is like unprecedented. John, are you able to speak now?
We'll see.
There you
Testing.
go.
Yes, you can.
That
Okay.
worked.
Okay, so I do have a quick question. Did you guys cover at all working group composition? Because I know there's some questions about, you know, can committers that belong to corporations be voters as well?
Yep.
Okay, all right. So I'll go back and re-listen. Awesome, and thanks for whoever took the notes on the voting rules section.
Badly me.
Okay. So what I did is just go ahead, Kevin, and just click on the link there. So what I've got here is I just created the milestone, and each one of these issues is really just has a checkbox list of items. And these are items that are defined as requirements in the working group process, right? So if you want to choose the opportunity phase, that's where we're in right now. So you can see that we have a list of things we have to accomplish according to the Eclipse Foundation working group process, right? So as we kind of accomplish these, we'll put in some check marks. And there's two other phases that have similar check marks. So again, we can continue check marking these things off as we progress. And then I figure what we could also do is begin creating issues that are related to each of these. I haven't figured out the mechanics yet, but for example, communications infrastructure, right? We have to define what that is. I think we can mostly use what we have in place already. So I don't know if anything will change. We need like recruiting material, right? So we got to have a prospectus, a member prospectus, and all this stuff. Each one of these things should probably be issues, right? And they'll all have, all share this same milestone. So in fact, it might be that they become dependent issues for these various phases, right? So this is the thinking that I currently have in terms of how to track progress. I don't know how to right now characterize when we can release 4.0, right? Because one of the requirements that we have, in fact, I'll send out an email on this, is any new specifications that we have should go through the working group process. The specification process, right? So we need to have the working group in place, create or finalize the specification process, and any new specs will have to go through that with all the votes, with the voting mechanism in place and everything, right? I think we should set that as a stake in the ground.
Sorry, John, this also goes for standalone specs?
Yeah, standalone specs as well.
Yeah, thanks.
Good question. So, you know, let's put a stake in the ground. Let's use this as a forcing function for us to get the working group up and running. And, you know, then we can move forward with the 4.0 release. I mean, technically you could still work on the specs. We just can't vote and pass them.
Or release them.
Or release them, yes.
You know, on this side, we talked about it last week briefly. The MicroProfile 4.0 is going to be delayed because we need a working group to release. That is what we know. But I think we need to send a note to the working group because I haven't seen it arrive yet. And it seems that we are, you know, there's something like we need to make it so that everyone knows what is stopping. Not everyone is interested in being in these conversations with the working group and everything that tackles. We have discussed this 2 weeks in a row saying not everyone is interested in being part of what comes next. Some are only interested in the code and in the APIs and in the extensions and everything else. So can we do an honor to them, to those ones that care, so that we're paying attention?
Yeah, Amelia, you're a great, straight person, because we are actually, John and I, we were drafting up a message exactly related to that to get it out to the whole community. We wanted to run it by Mike just to make sure we were not overstating anything as far as what's required or not required. And then we were going to send it out on our Google group to let everybody know.
Okay, so isn't it, this is great, because I'm concerned. I have been concerned for 2 months now.
Yeah, I'll push that out after the call.
Right. The other thing is maybe is kind of, we should also set up like a target. When do we plan work group, I mean, to be reviewed? I mean,
So
when, yeah.
It becomes a little bit difficult to nail that down. I mean, we could try and put some forcing functions and, some dates. We may or may not make them. There's a couple of things that become a little bit more difficult, like nailing down the working group fee structure is going to probably be a bit of a conversation. We need 5 participants in order to be a working group, right?
Yeah, that's
so
that's kind of thing I was thinking as well. I think that kind of thing is we should talk in advance, and then finally it's 5 groups, five members. Probably not going to be difficult, I would think. And then
and that's why I think it's really important for all the vendors, and we have been getting a lot of feedback, right? On the working group proposal, and provide feedback on the spec process, which may just fall back to the Eclipse Foundation spec process, as Kevin mentioned, right? But get feedback in early, concerns back in early on the working group proposal.
So for when we talked about, when we started these conversations at the beginning of April, and a get was sent to the marketing stating the new role, and it goes until the end of June, but tentative we're saying May 31st, because if the approval needs to go to the Eclipse board of directors for any new project and things like that, it is a minimum of 2 weeks for the document to arrive to them before the call. So clearly we are likely to miss June, but we're in April, right? So maybe depending on how much work we do in the next 2-3 weeks, I think June is tentative, like based on what we have and what we're pushing via the media. I think John was correct at the beginning, back in early April, when he said we need soft deadline, otherwise we will go forever. Usually I do not like soft deadlines, but in this case it's necessary because it deals with releases. It's a major help.
A comment to that, I don't think you need board approval. It's only executive director, so it won't take 2 weeks.
Right.
Okay, good to know. 2 weeks. Okay. That is even better, because we didn't know that last week.
Did that change at some point?
No, I think that's been communicated all the time, but check with Paul to be on the sure side.
Can we check?
You used to need board approval.
I don't think so. Not for a working group.
Working group, I don't think so.
Nope.
No?
Nope.
Yeah, if you look at the, you want to go ahead and just click on, in fact, do the incubation phase.
I thought the charter had to be approved. I swear I remember voting on some of those things when I was on the board.
Where would we have a quick link for that?
But you
go back to the GitHub just for a quick second.
Tanya was trying to talk.
Yeah, click on the bottom one.
But we're over
the incubation phase. So this is the last phase before we go before we go final. You'll see there's executive director approval actually on each of these steps.
Right.
So we at least I think to leave incubation phase, we need executive director approval. Yeah, if you want to go ahead and click on that.
Well, yeah, and actually, I mean, we need executive director approval for each of the phases.
Can we let Tanya talk?
Certainly.
Yeah, so I will look it up just to make sure, but my understanding is that it's the working group is you need the executive director approval, For the specification process, however, I think you may need the board approval as well.
Okay.
Okay. Tanya,
I'll look it up while we're on the call.
can you check if you can send us a message to the forum directly with whatever you find out? That would be amazing.
Well, that, okay, so
yeah, go
I
ahead.
just,
Kevin, go ahead.
yeah, so just to clarify that though, Amelia, I mean, we don't need multiple people coming in with multiple directions. I mean, I think, we've been working with the Eclipse Foundation. We have figured out what the rules are, and John's been documenting them in this milestone. So I think we've got the answer.
Okay. This is good then.
One more question. Can we do RC release without the specification process right now?
Did you say to do release
RC,
candidates?
release candidates.
Yes, that is allowed.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, and I think it's worth folks, you know, continuing to work on the specs. We just can't have a final vote, but definitely, you know, well, we don't know who the committer voters are going to be, and sorry, and I missed part of that conversation earlier, but there's going to be, you know, various vendors voting. So it would actually be good for, you know, at least the various vendors to go through and look at the specs and see if there's anything that is concerning, so we can hopefully expedite the voting process. But it's also, and this gets back to the one thing that I brought up a while back, and God, we're over. You know what?
Yep.
I'll discuss it later. I'll bring it up later.
Yeah, I think we better.
Sorry, you guys, I have to drop. I have to call. I'm 4 minutes late.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody.
Oh, and please, can you throw out the YouTube once it's done? We missed last week.
Oh, yeah. I do that every time I record. So.
Wait, did I miss last week? I thought I pushed out last week's.
I didn't see it. Like,
Last week's is out there.
We usually always retweet it with the @ but I didn't see it, so I missed.
Oh, maybe I missed the tweet. All right. So
Okay.
guilty, I guess. And same bat time, same bat channel, right?
Thank you,
Yep.
everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you very
everyone.
much.
I didn't think Kevin was going to say it, so I had to say it.
Really good call.